Good morning, everyone. My name is Randy Wilburn, and I want to welcome you to the second edition of the Onward Ozarks program from the NWA Council. I'm excited to be here today. I so wish I could be in person with this event. We have such a great group of people here. I am the host of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. We cover the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life here in the Ozarks. And I'm just excited to be with you guys today. We have an outstanding program, and I don't want to waste any more time. I want to get right into it. I want to make sure that you guys know that we mentioned we put out a selective bribe today, and that most of the people on the call should have received a $10 Uber Eats card. And we're asking you to post in the chat now how you use that $10. We want to learn a little bit more about that. And if you are eating or drinking something on us right now, please let me know in the chat. And as always, the chat is available for any questions that you have throughout the entirety of this event. But we want to make sure that you use that, and we will be monitoring it. I will be monitoring it. And remember, there are no dumb questions. The only dumb question is the one you don't ask. So please activate and use the chat. I want to introduce Kevin Trainer, who is going to provide some information about the Public Relations Society of America, or PRSA, our co-host today. Kevin is on the PRSA board. And so can you briefly tell us a little bit about PRSA?
Randy, thanks for having me on, and good morning, everybody. We're looking forward to a very exciting panel. And on behalf of the Northwest Arkansas chapter of the Public Relations Society of America, I want to thank the Northwest Arkansas Council, our friends Rob Smith, Nate Green, and everyone, the council, for playing this great panel. You're in for a real treat. There are a lot of people on with us this morning, and I want to thank Randy and Antoinette, Brett, Worth, Chelsea for sharing just a bit of their expertise with all of us today. But did want to take an opportunity to tell you a little bit about PRSA. It's a dynamic organization of professionals within Northwest Arkansas and our surrounding area, and really invite you to get involved. We have representatives from all different areas of public relations. We get together and have an opportunity to learn from each other, grow professionally, and I can tell you what it's like to be able to talk to colleagues from around the region that share some of the same challenges and opportunities that I do here at the University of Arkansas. But I invite you to check out some of our opportunities. Our board's happy to talk to you about any membership benefits. And if you want to message me in the chat, happy to get you some more information. I will mention we have an open networking event coming up on September 21st from 4 to 6 p.m. We'll have more information coming soon, but that's open to everyone. And we would love to meet and get to know you there. But you can find our contact information at nwaprsa.org. Please follow us on Twitter and Facebook. And if you're interested, again, message me in the chat. But with that, we're looking forward to today's discussion and with our esteemed panelists. And Randy, thanks for the time to say hello, and best of luck to everybody this morning.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us, and we really appreciate it. This is a very important topic, so I certainly want to get into discussing public relations. I did want to share a couple of messages in the chat and shout out to a few people. Rodrigo Salas, he used his card to order at the 211 Cafe. Another person, Adora Curry, used their card to order at Heroes Coffee, and somebody even used their card at the Commons Bar at Theater Squared. So shout out to all of those local businesses and those individuals that have had a chance to use it. I did get a message. And Jessica Ford, Chick-fil-A. We got to give Chick-fil-A a shout out. Big shout out to Truett Kathy, and just thank you for the chicken sandwich. But bottom line is, some of you have said, hey, I haven't gotten it yet. You will get it. We will monitor this chat. And at the end of this program, even if you haven't received it before the end of this event, we'll make sure before the end of the day that you do get that Uber Eats gift card, and you'll be able to use that. So let's move right into introducing our four wonderful guests. Antoinette Grahada is editor-in-chief of Arkansas Soul, a nonprofit digital publication creating content by, for, and about BIPOC Arkansans. She has reported for print, digital, and broadcast organizations for 15 years. Some of you may remember her from KUAF. One thing you may not know about Antoinette is that she has experienced entertaining children as a cow mascot through her work with the Spark Foundation. That sounds like a lot of fun, Antoinette. A nonprofit which provides increased increased access to health and fitness education and opportunities. Our next guest is Chelsea Helms, and she has worked as a broadcast journalist for almost 6 years. The upstate New Yorker's career started in Grand Junction, Colorado, where she began as a reporter, and she worked her way up to the evening anchor desk, where she is now in Fayetteville as the main anchor at KNWA. When she's not working on special reports for the news station, Chelsea goes to great heights to push herself mentally and physically out of her comfort zone. She loves rock climbing, both indoors and outdoors, and always jumps at the opportunity to go. Our next guest is Worth Sparkman. Worth was an editor with the Northwest Arkansas Business Journal before working at Tyson Foods and corporate communications for nearly a decade. He returned to journalism with the launch of Axios Northwest Arkansas in May. As an Oklahoma alumnus, we won't hold that against him. He will root for OU when it transitions to the SEC. All right. And then finally, Brett Schulte is a freelance journalist and a journalism professor at the University of Arkansas. He's written for the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Politico magazine. He's now writing a book about the world's only incorporated village for children, Boys Town, Nebraska. All right, so we've got a really strong group of folks here today. I just want to talk a little bit about the program and just want to welcome you again to Onward Ozarks, which is the Northwest Arkansas Council's program. It's hosted on a quarterly basis to share exciting news, happenings, and conversations in the region. I've always told people that, it's a pitiful frog that doesn't praise its own pond, and Northwest Arkansas Council does a great job of praising this pond that we have here in Northwest Arkansas. So we got to continue to do that. This is just the second event. In April, we talked about the new Sky Bridge project at XNA with the folks from Height Jackson. And today, we're convening a panel of esteemed journalists. And so here's our thinking. We want to bridge the gap between what many people perceive journalism and journalists to be and what journalism and journalists actually are. We want everyone to leave this Zoom feeling more knowledgeable about journalism's purpose and the important role it serves in this community. And we also want to encourage your communication and smart dialogue with these journalists and others. We suggest that a tweet you're reading from someone you may or may not know should not be confused with the actual truth, because we all hate fake news. So let's get started and jump right into it today. And I have a lot of questions that we want to ask, but I certainly want to encourage you, those of you that are in the chat, if you have a question, please ask it. If it's along the vein of anything that we are going to ask, we will just move on to that question. But if it's not, and it's a unique question, we certainly want to talk to the panelists about that. So let's go ahead and get started. Question for Worth. We're going to start with Worth Sparkman. He started what's kind of the new thing now, and I don't know about you guys, but I probably subscribe to a few newsletters, but Axios NWA has quickly become my first go-to newsletter in the morning to get my nice digest of news before I start my day. But Worth, tell me a bit about Axios and the role it plays in Northwest Arkansas. How is pitching to a short form media outlet like Axios different from pitching a more traditional publication, say maybe like the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette?
Yeah, thanks, Randy. I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having us on and for emceeing this morning. So Axios, for those who don't know, started about 4 years ago in DC by the same founders that started Politico. They really started off focusing on business and politics and tech, and developed this newsletter format in what we call smart brevity. So a very short and concise style. The idea is to make readers smarter, faster. So just as you said, hopefully it's a good quick scan in the morning and that you feel like you've walked away from that email knowing more than you knew going into it. In Northwest Arkansas, our remit, our focus is to try and tell readers specifically about what's going on in Northwest Arkansas and to curate other reporting and add enterprise original reporting from Alex Golden, my co-writer, and myself, as much as we can every day. So We survey all the other media out there and try to curate some of that and float what we think are the top stories in our newsletter.
Yeah. I love that. And I also think that one of the things that I've noticed in reading some other newsletters, that sometimes you can tell when people have are classically trained journalists versus people just kind of rehashing information, right? And I think we're all used to kind of just rereading stuff, but you guys put your spin on it. It's definitely, you can tell that you've taken time to curate this information in a unique way. And I certainly applaud you. And I want to thank you for creating that opportunity for me to have that little bit of extra news in the morning. So that's exciting. I have a question for Chelsea. Is a news release still the best way to gain a publication's attention? And if not, what's the most effective way? Contact a reporter, producer, news director. How does that work, Chelsea?
So this is one where the answer is yes and no. Sure, it's awesome to get a news release with everything that your organization is planning on doing in the coming days. But here's the thing. My newsroom, just like I'm sure a lot of the other newsrooms in this chat right now, we get hundreds of press releases every single day. So it might not be the most effective, even though we will see it. So what I suggest is really establish a relationship with a reporter in the area. So maybe that's me. You introduce yourself to me out in the park. We see each other and you tell me a little bit about yourself. We exchange emails. I'm going to be a lot more inclined to respond to the email that you sent me directly versus one that you sent to the entire newsroom. And then I'm going to forward it on to our news reporters. Our reporters are a great resource for all of you out there who have different events that you need covered, because they're always looking to pitch news stories. So if you reach out to them directly versus the entire newsroom, they're going to feel like they have a leg up when it comes to our editorial meetings and they need to pitch. So my suggestion would be just really develop relationships with those people who are out in your community, that being our reporters or even our photographers, and pitch them your story ideas. Because I think we can all agree, we notice when we see our name in that little thing where it's like, hello, space, Chelsea. It's like, you generically put my name in there. And then it's like, yeah, it might be an important email and we'll read through it, but it's not going to be as attention grabbing. Also, you can message us on Facebook, Instagram. We're always monitoring those different chats. So really taking advantage of all the different mediums that we have today. You know, it's kind of like when you're applying for a job, you don't just send your resume in and hope someone calls you, you follow up on it. So you can call our assignment editor and things like that.
Yeah, I love that. You said the R word, Chelsea, and that's great. Relationships. That's what it's all about. Every journalist loves a good relationship. So the way to the journalist's heart might be a Starbucks card and just checking in with them to see how they're doing. And you'd be surprised that you might actually get your phone call returned. So I want to ask this question to all of you on this panel. What is the most effective way to contact you about a potential story? Antoinette?
I am good with press releases because we are small, we are young, so we're not getting 100 at a time. So I'm definitely going to see it. But for me, I think phone calls are really good. Even if I don't answer, I get more out of hearing you tell me your pitch, telling me your story, even if you're just leaving that voicemail, and I'm more likely to call you back.
Okay. All right. How about Brett? Why don't you share it from your standpoint?
The pitches that have caught my eye, and I tend to ignore most of them, and I ignore most of them because they're often just promotional. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking for things that really sort of keep it real. And in the stories that I'm pitching to as a freelancer to the New York Times or the Washington Post or whoever I'm writing for, I need to have conflict. I need to know that there's some tension in the story. And I also need to know that there's going to be people available for me to talk to. So the more the press release has done the job for me of finding out what the story is, what the tension of the story is, and who the people are, not the people who work for the nonprofit or the business or whatever, but the people who are being impacted. If those voices are in there, and I know that there are sources, I know that there are examples of the impact and the relevance of the story, then I'm much more likely to follow up and start digging. My pitches, when I'm pitching a story to the Times, I usually have half of my reporting done already. I've usually done weeks of reporting over the phone because I have to convince myself that there's a story there, and I have to convince them that there's a story there. And so the more of that can be provided to me, the more likely I am to follow up on it.
Yeah. And Worth, what about you?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with Chelsea. It's relationship driven. So email is okay, but for anybody that knows me and has dealt with me in the past, phone call is going to go a lot further.
Yeah, I know that does make a lot of sense. And I always tell people to pick up the phone. It's the easiest thing to do to connect with somebody. You'd be surprised that actually somebody will answer on the other end. So, I have a question for you, Antoinette. Arkansas Soul is about elevating Black and Brown voices. Why are dedicated news outlets like yours important to the community here?
Organizations like ours are important because we are representing communities that have historically not been well represented in the media, mainstream media, in terms of the stories that are being told and the people that are telling those stories. And that's problematic because, according to recent census data, the country is becoming more racially and ethnically diverse. However, newsrooms have not kept up pace. The Pew Research Center in 2018 released a report that found that newsrooms are actually whiter than the workforce as a whole. So the country's workforce as a whole, about 65% identify as non-Hispanic whites. That number jumps to 77% in just newsrooms. The report also found that that could be changing. Younger newsrooms tended to show more racial, ethnic, and gender diversity, so a step in the right direction. Also a sign of how important building that pipeline is. One of the ways that we do that is we host workshops for high school students to introduce them to the field of journalism. To continue the pipeline, you need to have examples of professionals in the field. And so that's kind of that continuation. So our platform is a space where professional journalists of color can hone their skills in a space where they're valued, respected, and feel safe. Because many of us who have worked in predominantly white spaces have not been lucky enough to have that. And that leads to burnout and people leaving the industry altogether. And then you don't have those people to look up to. It's important to have people of color in the newsroom so that they can advocate for those stories for these communities to which they belong and that they know about. I would argue it's also important to have people of color in positions of leadership in newsrooms, because as a reporter, I can pitch stories all day long about my community, or I can speak up when I see you trying to cover something diverse and maybe you're not handling it the best way. But if I have a news director or an editor or whatever tell me, just dismiss me or tell me, I'm fine, I'm not wrong, or just I was listening to this podcast yesterday, actually, and this Black woman at a TV station was trying to pitch a story about the Black community, and her editor shot it down, saying that it wasn't going to appeal to a wide audience. So when you have that, you can't get those stories out, right? And it's important to get those stories out because you want to be reflective of your community. And as we've talked about in Northwest Arkansas, we're very diverse, right? Well, we cover the whole state, which is just as diverse. And we want to get those stories out, not only just to accurately represent the community or the state, but also to connect with these communities who maybe they haven't been as engaged in media because they haven't seen themselves represented. And as a journalist, I think it's our job to educate the public, so we can create a more informed citizenry. But if people aren't paying attention, they can't be informed, they can't be involved. So we're hoping that we can reach these audiences that have felt not represented or neglected, even by creating this space specifically for them so that they can be educated and become involved in their community if they so choose, however that happens to look.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we could do a whole segment on this.
Yes.
It is a real issue, and it's something that I think we've dealt with for years. And there have been actually a couple of people had asked a question simply around this area. It's somebody said it's very noticeable, especially with billboard ads and social media graphics, rarely any diversity representing the news team. It also being able to be broad in the news that you're covering enhances the way in which stories are told. And I've always told people that I like a good story. I don't care if it's a red, black, brown, or green story. I like a good story, and I think that's really what should drive the whole process. So we're going to continue to push that envelope, and I think it's important for folks to constantly ask for that, to demand that kind of news and that kind of coverage, because people want to hear it from all angles. I want to kind of piggyback on what you talked about, and I want to ask Brett a question, because Brett is you teach this, Brett. So you talk to U of A students about pitching. You just kind of walked us through your process for pitching, but everybody doesn't have your skill set. We're not all writing for the Washington Post or the New York Times, although maybe we'd like to. Tell me a bit about that, about the whole pitch process, and then tell me what in your mind is a good pitch and what's a bad pitch. And I would say, thinking about the audience that we have here today, businesses, organizations. I talk to these people all the time, and it's like, how do you pitch the best angle of a story that may be important to you, but you're not sure it's important to everybody else?
Well, thanks, Randy. I think it goes back to what you were saying about telling a good story. We're all in the storytelling business, whether you're on the pitching side, or if you're on the, if you're trying to get your story told, if you're on the media side. I think that pitches need to balance a few things. They need to balance the facts and with narrative. So if you, as somebody in the business world or the nonprofit world, feel like there's an important story that needs to be told, you think about how you're going to tell it to your friend over a beer as opposed to a stranger, because you're going to tell it in a more narrative fashion while also still giving the juiciest stuff. And the reporters, the people on our side, we want that same thing. So when I said before, like, I do a lot of reporting before I do the pitch, what I'm searching for is the story, like the real narrative. So I will keep working the phone to find somebody who I think is a really great example, a really great anecdote, because we live and die by anecdotes. And anecdotes are what we remember. Our brains are wired for anecdotes, storytelling. That's how we've evolved over millennia. It's how information was exchanged from generation to generation. It was through narrative. So if I can find a really great narrative to hang my pitch on, I'm going to lead with that. And then once I've got somebody hooked with a story from a real person, then I can start, filling in sort of the nut graph kind of stuff. Like, this is why it matters. This is the bigger picture. This is the trend here, or this is the impact. But the more people you have in your story, in your pitch, I think the more success you're going to have. And I tell my students, the first letter in journalism is P, for people. Always lead with somebody.
Yeah.
Even if it's tight.
Yeah. And I know somebody asked a question earlier in terms of press releases, and I'm going to throw this at you, Brett. Is there a prescribed length of a press release, or I've always thought brevity was key, but what's your thought on that?
Yeah, they should be pretty tight. I mean, editors get undated. I mean, as Chelsea was saying, they're getting hundreds a day. Mm-hmm. So I think that you should give yourself a few paragraphs, and you should make it snappy, and you should really drive home like why this matters, what the impact is. If there's conflict or tension, even if the tension is you're the American Cancer Society, and the tension is like, where are we in the fight against cancer? Show me a cancer survivor, show me somebody who's suffering because they lost somebody from cancer. I mean, like, you have to make that drama real and apparent early, and that's what gives it urgency.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. I got another question for Antoinette. This is a similar question for you. Tell me, what are some things PR professionals should avoid when communicating with the media? Do you have any examples of a particularly bad pitch or interaction?
Oh, there have been many. But I will preface that by saying that often comes from not necessarily like a professional firm. I know a lot of spaces don't have a specific communications person, especially nonprofits. And so it's someone who's not familiar with the field and kind of the ins and outs of it, which is okay. But if you're listening to this, here are some tips. I agree. Brevity is key. Do not send me super, super long press releases. I know everybody wants to have all those paragraphs at the end about how great they are. And like we were talking about Cancer Society, all the people they save. That's all very, very important. However, what I really need to know, do your 5 W's if that makes it easy for you. Who, what, where, when, why, even the how, throw that in there. I would say bullet points are super helpful. I've done a couple of these panels, and something that comes up every time is PDFs. People ask if they should send us a press release in a PDF or in the email. Typically, the answer is that we prefer both. It's nice if you copy and paste the text into the email and then attach a PDF. However, the big gripe that a lot of journalists have is when you send us a PDF with the photo in the PDF, because we can't pull that out. And that's not super helpful. That's a tiny thing, but it comes up a lot in these things. Also, don't send me a press release that doesn't have the number of someone who will actually answer the phone. Sometimes people have, Chelsea's nodding. Sometimes people send you either no email, no phone number, or it's like, they're copy paste and this person's out of town, but I don't know that. And then I don't know who to call. And probably the worst thing that ever happens is when people want me to cover an event and they send me, hey, here's the press release. Hope to see you there. And it might say like what they're doing and maybe that it's Friday, but it doesn't tell me like what time or where. And I know a lot of times people are like, in a hurry, but like, please, please, please make sure that you tell me like where it's at and what time and someone to contact. You would be surprised how many times that is not all in there.
Yeah, I think that those are all really good points, and I also would add, and I don't know if you guys see this a lot, but a lot of times organizations or even businesses that are actually large businesses, they don't have a press kit on their website. Right? Am I right? Am I the only one that has noticed that? And I mean, I've only been doing the podcast here in Northwest Arkansas for about 2 years, but I've noticed that nobody has a press kit, and it's like the simplest thing to put together. There are templates online that you can kind of get an idea for what that looks like. And I'm sure, maybe somebody wants to quickly just speak to that, and maybe what would be expected in a simple press kit. I mean, you've been around for a while.
Yeah. Antoinette reminded me of something. Always with a news release, it's great to have what is the art. So that's the question that I asked as an editor. It's the question that we ask. Alex and I ask each other every day when we look at Axios: is what is the piece of art here? Is it a photo of a person? Is there something that illustrates it? Is it a chart or a graphic of some sort? So anything, if you're going to pitch a story, try to think a little bit visually ahead of time and have at least an option. And in terms of press kits, I 100% agree. And we worked some on the corporate side on press kits, and they can be cumbersome to try to put together in a short period of time. I would say that may be the reason why you're not seeing as many. But from a journalist standpoint, yeah, there needs to be at least some visual thought put into it. I would also say that it's good to take into account all forms of media, so audio, video, print or still or online, so that there's something even for you, Randy, to lift and put into your podcast. So you've got a little bit of audio there. Chelsea could have some video, and then we've got a still of some sort.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because actually podcasting is becoming a whole nother medium where people are telling stories. It's the thing that I like to do. I love to write, but I actually like to talk more than that, as you guys can see. So I don't struggle in that area, but I mean, there's so many stories that can be told, and that's something that I see more people embracing. And so I really want to encourage you, don't confine yourself to just telling your story or sharing some newsworthy item just through the written word. Their spoken word, I think, is just as strong. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, we have a podcast on Arkansas Soul called Affirmative Action that I produce. And so we definitely agree with that piece. But I think something that ties us all together is that no matter what your focus is in terms of the media, pretty much everybody has a website at this point. So you can put all sorts of media on there, right? So, Chelsea is in TV, so they're very visual, but they have a website. So there's print that goes with that, or there's a photo that goes with that, right? Worth and I are both digital first, but on a website, you can have audio like we do. We have print, we have video. So Randy's right. Don't just confine yourself to one thing. We're happy to think of ourselves as multimedia journalists. And that's just something that you can think about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So this is a question for whoever wants to answer. It's sometimes said that news stories tend to include comments from the people on the extremes of an issue, right? We get this, the whole partisan issue. You're either on the right side or the left side. But those more toward the middle sometimes aren't represented as well in stories. Is this a fair criticism? And if it is it something that is fixable?
I think, if I can jump in, I think that a lot of it is the people in the middle aren't always talking. You're always having those people with one opinion that's so far to one side or the other side. They're always the ones who are calling in the newsrooms, emailing the newsrooms, asking for the opportunity to share their story. And of course, if someone's a staunch Republican, we're not going to just share their side without having someone who's on the more liberal side of the spectrum. So you kind of have to balance the two out. But I would just say, if you know anyone who's wanting to maybe pitch a story that is kind of polarizing like that, have some people in the bucket ready to go who are willing to interview, who are maybe more on that middle ground, because we're sometimes looking, but you can ask 50 people to talk on camera and you might only get the two who are on complete opposite sides.
Yeah, it's somebody just, Damara Baker just, hi Damara, but she just said, are people in the middle not talking, or is more that their stories are less news catching attention? And I don't know if that's the case, right? It's like, I guess you could use the argument now for somebody that's kind of flatly in the middle of the whole mask debate, right? Where they want to wear a mask, but they understand, how people feel on the other side of the equation with regard to that. And is that tempting enough of a story to be able to talk about that? I think that's a good question.
I think it depends on the news outlet. I think a lot of times when people talk about the media, what they're thinking of or what comes to mind is what's most visible. So that's cable news. So you have your talking heads that are shouting at each other, which for many of them, that's their wheelhouse, because that's how they get viewers. That's how they get, their job is to get those viewers, to get advertisers, et cetera, et cetera. And that's at a national level. And people a lot of times take that and apply it to the community level, which is not what we do at all. Our job is to cover our community. So it doesn't always have to be a fight. It can be someone who is not sure about the vaccine. They may not be totally for or totally against. There's a story about people who just aren't sure. And that's what's happening in my community. And that's okay. I think it is a combination, and it depends on what your outlet is and what their goals are in terms of their content.
Yeah, that makes a lot of point. It makes a good point there. I do want to go back. Somebody asked a question regarding the press kits. Are you suggesting a general press kit about the organization, or a press kit specific to a story you're pitching? And I would say probably more of a general press kit that everybody should have. And I would say, if you're thinking about a general press kit, the kind that I use, I have a couple of really good headshots, maybe some other images that are related to the organization, and then some contact information and a little bit about the story. So in your case, Kira, downtown Springdale, you want to talk about that. You want to talk about Jill Dabbs, who's the executive director of that program. And anybody here it's running an organization, whether for-profit or nonprofit, you guys got to get a press kit on your website. Trust me when I say this, it is the lowest hanging fruit that you can put out there that is beneficial, especially to these great journalists that are here on this call. It's one of the first things they look for when trying to tease out some information before they start making additional follow-up calls and the like. They want to understand, well, who are we talking about here? So I really want to encourage you to do that. And that's a great question there, Kira. Thank you so much for that. So let's jump into another question that, and anybody can jump in and answer this. Do both sides always get their say in a story? And I think I know where this is going. And is that even true if you know full well one side is purposely being misleading? Worth?
Do both sides. I would say that the objective is to always try to present both sides.
Right.
Does it always happen 100% of the time? No, it does not. And some of it goes back to even what Chelsea said. Sometimes you have somebody on the other end of the spectrum that does not want to talk for whatever reason. They will feel like they're not able to provide their side of the story because there may be a litigation issue, there may be public relations types of issues. So, I would say we try to never tell one side of the story, but it does happen.
Yeah, sure it does. Go ahead, Antoinette.
It's a very weird space to be in because it's something we consider, I think, a lot more than we used to, because as journalists, you're taught, both sides, right? But I also think it depends on what you mean by both sides, because there are instances in which someone's opinion is very much not fact, and are you doing more harm than good by sharing that opinion?
Yeah.
I want to follow up on what Antoinette said. I think that's absolutely correct. We always want to have multiple sources in our story. What we don't want to engage in is just both sidism, which is just believing that both sides have equal value. What journalists should be doing is following the preponderance of evidence. So you prioritize the facts and the evidence rather than trying to balance just this idea of there being two equal sides for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. Chelsea, you want to weigh in as well?
I mean, I would echo everything they say. Everyone said so far. I would just say to keep in mind that when it's coming from a news station like ours, that's a broadcast news station, every script that we have before it goes over air is read by someone else. So we have this rule at my news station that's called 2 sets of eyes. So if I write a news story, my news director, Lisa B, will be the one who second eyes that story. So we're always having 2 sets of eyes go on things before they go on air. So we're hopefully catching if things aren't balanced, but kind of just to echo Antoinette, not everyone's voice necessarily deserves, not necessarily an outlet, but maybe our outlet that has like such a, vast coverage of the market. So what I'm trying to say is we're not going to just give anyone the opportunity to speak. You got to be an expert in some sorts. And an example I'll give is at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was saying, wash your hands, make sure you wash your hands. Well, why is Sandra telling me that I have to wash my hands? What expertise does Sandra have? No, we're going to have a medical expert speak on that.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Next question I have is for Worth. And I want to kind of tap into your, you have done classical journalism, but you've also worked on the PR side of things. You work with Tyson. How has having a PR background changed your perspective in creating and selling news content? I'm sorry, creating and selecting news content, not selling it. Well, you do have to kind of sell it, but yes, go ahead.
Right. I can remember, that's a great question. I can remember having a conversation with a couple of coworkers a few years ago, and saying, if there is justice in this world, I will one day be a journalist again. So I'm pretty impressed that I'm back in this role. I think it was extremely valuable to see how the sausage is made on the other side of whatever telephone you're on. So I always felt like a good PR person had spent some time in the newsroom, and I now feel like it's probably pretty valuable for journalists to at least have a pretty good grasp of what that PR professional is dealing with, or communications person. I feel like now I have a better understanding of what the pressure points are for that communications person, and the types of pressure that they're under from their leadership, and also kind of what it looks like for their leadership. I would say, I don't know that it's really impacted how I create or select content. News is news. What it has done is maybe I understand that what a lead time really is. It's not realistic to call a corporation up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and expect some response back within 2 hours over a controversial issue. Perhaps, and it's happened where I've called people in the past as a reporter and asked them for their response to a lawsuit, and they said, "What lawsuit?" And you always hate that because then you're shorting them a little bit. So I would say it's given me just a different perspective and a way to approach things.
Yeah, no, that's good. Anybody else want to add to that, or just their thoughts about from a PR perspective?
With the lead time, I would also just say that, like, as a PR professional, when you send that press release, have your people on standby, because if you send it out that day about something happening that day, I feel like it's a responsibility, because I know definitely, like, Chelsea's on a tight time crunch, and so she's going to call you right then, or her director's going to call you right then, and you need to be available that afternoon.
Yeah, yeah. The last thing you want is to send out a press release and then not be accessible. That's kind of
Right.
like the kiss of death with any news story. So, but
And
it
one
it
thing
happens though.
Well, one thing I'll say too is a lot of times companies will send their press releases out a month in advance, which is great. It gives us time to plan for things. But if you're going to do that, and everyone at my news station is going to hate me for saying this right now, but send it again closer to the event.
No.
I say that just because we're already inundated with emails, but always send it a couple days close to the event, because here's the deal. Things get lost. We have breaking news that maybe trumps something. So yes, it's great to plan ahead, but a great reminder is always sending it a few days ahead.
Yeah.
100%. I agree.
In the translation of what Chelsea said, they don't want you to spam them, but be responsible about getting it out closer to the actual date of the event as well. So I think that will help you out. I have a question for Brett. How is the job market for your recent grads? Are you seeing fewer journalism majors, and how has this changed your job and how you guide students about the future?
Oh, that's tough. The job market's really hard. It's really hard. Journalism jobs are disappearing every day. We are seeing fewer majors, but it's stabilized recently. I think we're up against a number of sort of headwinds, and one of them is the politics of hating the media. Mm-hmm. We've had students come here who want to be journalists who've had to lie to their parents about it, or have had to fight with their parents about it. I had a student years ago whose parents disowned him because he wanted to be a journalist instead of an engineer. It was heartbreaking. That said, journalism majors are in demand. I mean, they may not find a job in journalism, although there are jobs, and especially for young people who are willing to work for not very much. But even if they don't find a job in journalism, we don't see our majors having a hard time getting placed, because nonprofits and corporations, businesses are just hungry for people who know how to communicate, who know how to prioritize facts, who can even just write a decent email, who have multimedia skills. Communication is still, and we're in the communication age. It's been that way for a long time, and we're just even more so every day. And those are the skills we're teaching. So it's actually a great time to be a journalism major, despite the fact that journalism itself is struggling to find its way right now, at least economically. I mean, we have news media has more consumers than ever before. But yeah, the jobs themselves are sometimes scarce.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because as I think about, I have some friends that were writing for some pretty esteemed newspapers that have actually gone out on their own and gotten a Substack account, and they're writing they have a following, and so that following has moved from their traditional newspaper coverage to their Substack account, and that's kind of where things are headed, I think. It'd be interesting to see what that looks like, and that's a whole another rabbit hole that we could go down. How can this is for you, Brett. This is kind of a follow-up. How can people watching today, especially communication professionals here in Northwest Arkansas, help your students? And I will just add this. I have hired U of A students to help me with a couple of posts on my website and some other information. I go to Fiverr a lot and hire people, and a lot of times I'll ask them what their background is. A lot of people are journalists, especially if I'm asking them to do some show notes or some other writing. But what would you say is the best way that locals here could engage some of your students?
Paid internships.
Mhm.
Paid internships.
Yes.
Internships are valuable because of the experience, but a lot of students at the University of Arkansas, and this is one of the reasons I wear as a badge of honor working at the University of Arkansas. A lot of our students can't afford to work for free. We have first generation students here, a lot of first generation students, and even second generation students who can't afford it. They need to be paid as interns so that they can afford to get the experience to set up their careers, so that they can then contribute to the community in a way that's going to be meaningful going forward. I've had a lot of students get internship opportunities that they had to give up because they couldn't give up the job as a valet down at Bordino's because they needed the valet money. Yeah. Right. And then that handicaps them. It kneecaps them because without that internship experience, they're going into the job market flat-footed, as opposed to the kid who could afford to take an unpaid internship, who already had that advantage by that privilege. And the person's, the hirer, is going to be, oh, I'm going to take this person who already had all these summer internships, maybe unpaid. Well, the kid who's working at Bordino's, maybe just as qualified, maybe 10 times smarter, but never could afford to get that experience to put on his or her resume. So paying college students to do work, which I think is just a moral question, is the best way to help them and set them up. And it's good for the economy. It's going to be good for the businesses in the long run too, because they're going to get more talent that way.
If I could just jump in for one quick second, I just would like to say I am an example of that working. I am a first generation student. My father is an immigrant. My first paid internship was at the morning news, and here I am today.
Yeah,
that's cool.
When I was a student, I'll jump in too. I got a coveted internship at a photography agency in New York that was unpaid. So there was no way I could relocate and put myself up for any period of time in New York and do this internship. So I had to pass on that.
Yeah. That's a challenge. I mean, and somebody even asked, in terms of what's a fair wage for a paid internship, and I think it's going to depend on the organization. I don't know, Brett, if you're seeing any idea. I mean, obviously, I'm assuming it's maybe an hourly rate, but are you seeing any range at all? I hate to put you on the spot with that question.
Well, my understanding is that for a single person, a living wage in this area is $15 an hour.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's about what I was thinking. Yeah, that's about what I was thinking. Because and again, they're probably not going to be working a 40-hour week anyway. So there's that part of it. But just thinking about, you might need a paid intern for 10 to 15 or 20 hours a week, or even a month. But again, you want to pay them something to keep them coming back. And like I said in the chat, food doesn't count. So definitely to take care of folks. I had another good. Yeah, Worth.
Well, I was going to say there is a story in this morning's Northwest Arkansas Axios about living wage in Northwest Arkansas. So there's a link there to the MIT calculator.
That's known as a shameless plug, but that's good. I love that. So actually, a good friend of mine, Beth Bobbitt, had a great question. How important do you think media literacy is for non-journalists, like to include code of ethics, media bias, etc.? I hear so many people talking about not knowing what or who to believe. And maybe if we all had more background, maybe we would know how to choose outlets and how to read coverage. That's a good question.
I think media literacy is huge. And I think we need to start earlier, because I think we're working at the wrong end. Like, I think right now people are realizing how many people don't understand the media. And to be fair, the media has changed so much from what my grandmother experienced to what I'm experiencing, right? For a couple of years, I taught an intro freshman class at the University of Arkansas, and I always set aside a few days to do media literacy. And I was always blown away by how many of these 18 and 19-year-olds just didn't know what a reliable source was. And there's this great, I don't know if it exists anymore, but there's this great website that they turned it into a game where they would put real stories and then tell you the source, and then the kids would guess. And they would, have sources like Politico, and they'd be like, it's fake. And I'm like, And there's all sorts of things like that that they just don't know because no one had ever taught them. And so it's huge, but I think we have to start, in like middle school to start getting that into their brain so they understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Well, as we slowly get to wind up here, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but we're going to take this almost up to the hour, folks, because there's some really good questions here, and I don't want to leave people in a lurch. Question for Chelsea. You regularly tweet your station stories and other headlines. Is this expected for an anchor? How has your social media activity helped you and your station?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely expected for an anchor, especially in the digital age that we are in now. My station's philosophy, my company's philosophy, because my station is owned by Nexstar Media Group, is digital first. So we are hoping to always get out the information to our followers as fast as we can, whether that be through the station's accounts or my own personal accounts. I mean, the reality is when we are hired as an on-air broadcast journalist, we are quote unquote the face of the station. So people should be able to look at the information that I am putting out and be able to relate it to, oh, that's Chelsea Helms with KNWA. So they know that it's almost like a synonymous tweet. Sorry about my dog rolling on her bone in the background. Yep. But yeah, it's definitely a huge responsibility of journalists, and I would encourage more out there to be doing so. And especially those of you who are watching who are part of public relations world, if you see me tweet out something, maybe comment on it and start engaging with me, and then we build a relationship that way. This goes back to my first question of engaging with people so that we do develop that relationship, and then we're able to continue that in terms of a working partnership in the future. But yes, being active on social media is very, very important, whether that's just letting people learn about what's going on in their community or letting people know a little bit about me, because people don't want to know that I'm just Chelsea Helms who has a degree and works on the local news. They want to know that I'm going to the Fayetteville Farmers Market and enjoying the community just like everyone else is, because they want to know that I am a member of this community, even though maybe I wasn't born and raised here like other journalists in the region.
Yeah. That's a great point. I want to just add to this because somebody asked earlier. It was a question directed at me actually about the fact of whether terrestrial radio is going to go away and this podcast going to take the place. I don't know that terrestrial radio is going to go away, and I don't know what you guys think about that. I do think that podcasting gives you another outlet and another medium to tell a story in a long form, right? Because what I always tell people when they come on my podcast specifically is that, KNWA and all these other channels, they can only tell your story in a short format, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a bite-sized piece of who you are. I can open that up and expand it. And if I do it properly, then people will really get to learn more about you. And I think to me, that is the quintessential benefit of a good podcast. Some good podcasts are short and to the point. Think of Axios, but as a podcast, but others are, 20, 30, 45 minutes, and you walk away feeling like you just took a college level class. And I think that's the importance of, if you're going to spend your time consuming information, shouldn't you spend it consuming good information that's going to continue to edify you as we continue to, take this journey of life that we're all on. So that's just my 2 cents. I don't know if any of you have any thoughts on that.
I think you're right in that it won't go away. I think even as we talk about newspapers, they haven't gone away, they've just adapted. And so I think that's going to be true of many forms of media, and podcasting is just another outlet for folks. I think cars are going to continue to have radios in them. Phones are still going to be able to connect you to radio that you can stream. It's just going to be available in different ways.
Yeah. It's kind of like the way that I don't watch regular TV anymore. I watch time shifted, time adjusted TV.
Exactly.
So it's just when I want to do that. So, all right, we got 2 last questions before we close out. This question specifically is for Brett. What influence does a freelancer have in getting a story placed with a media outlet? And should people work with the freelancer on story ideas?
The freelancer can have a big impact. I mean, you want to find somebody who's got a relationship with an outlet, with a media outlet, somebody who works regularly with a certain editor in particular, or a certain outlet in particular. And freelancers are a great way to get to a particular outlet if you know somebody who is a regular contributor. I think that, as I said before, if you have a pitch that does some of the work for that journalist in terms of making sure that the nut of the story is there, like this is why it matters, this is the relevance, and these are the people who are impacted, you're going to, I think, get a more positive reaction from the journalist because they're going to see what the story is right away. And their reputation is always on the line too when they're pitching to their editor. So if they feel confident in the story and you've helped them feel confident that this is a story and it's not just promotional stuff, then I think that you're going to have a lot more success. And yeah, freelancers absolutely can be a good avenue.
Yeah.
For publication of some sort.
I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. I do want to ask, because somebody actually asked a question, which I think a lot of people think about but don't really bring up. But say you work with an organization where the people that are pitching out or pitching information don't have the strongest writing skills. So maybe their press release isn't, well worded, or there's a lot of typos and other things there, but the actual content is solid. It's just it wasn't presented in the clearest format. Does that take away from the actual press release, or do you guys look past that as a journalist and look at what the real story is here?
I mean, I would look past the fact that maybe they're not able to structure things properly, but the typos, that would definitely bother me. I think that a lot of us in journalism are kind of grammar Nazis, so I don't know that would be something that a lot of us would overlook. But yeah, if you're able to pitch a good story, then I think any of us could recognize what we think is a good story. Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah. I'll say I've definitely tossed news releases that just look like trash. So
yes, I agree. Our eyes are all trained to kind of see red when we see the typos or the formatting that's not correct. However, I will say, don't let that stop you from sending us your story, particularly if you are a nonprofit and you are someone that we've heard of. If you're with the American Cancer Society or the American Heart Association or whatever, we know you're a legitimate organization. I think what we're thinking of is sometimes we just get rambling emails from folks that are just like long run-on sentences about someone who wants to talk about their opinion. I think folks in nonprofits, we know that you don't have a communications person 9 times out of 10, and you may not be the strongest when it comes to grammar or formatting or whatever. So we'll look past it in those instances. So don't let that stop you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point. We've got to get a couple more questions. We got one more question. It's just a quick fire one to everyone. What is one thing someone who is pitching you a story should know? If somebody's pitching you a story, should know. Just give me a quick synopsis. Worth, you go first.
Yeah, just like Brett said earlier, and it's what we talk about at Axios. Tell it to me as if you were telling it to me at a bar.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Brett.
Well, I get pitches sent to me sometimes that just have no relation to me geographically. So, and it's just make sure that you know that there's some relevance for the journalists that you are pitching, right? Instead of just sort of like throwing things out blindly, you're probably not going to get a very good response. But if you know something about the journalists, from like where they're located or what their field of expertise or their kind of the beat, like what they cover is, I think you're going to have more luck.
Yeah. Antoinette?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that one. Make sure that you tell me why it matters, not just to you, but to someone else. I think a lot of times people are like, well, this is my new product and it's the best thing ever. Cool. Some guy down the street also created a new product at his business. Why is this important to me? Why is this important to the community?
Sure. Yeah. Chelsea?
At the end of the day, journalism is a public service. So those of us are public servants who are in journalism. So we need to make sure that the stories we are being pitched serve our community, serve the people who we're going to be relaying it to. So I would just want everyone who is a public relations background to understand that not every event, not every story you pitch to us is going to be a story that ends up in the paper, on the evening news. They might be great for our community calendar, but what we're really looking for are stories that serve our community.
Yeah. Speaking of stories that serve our community, I just want to remind everybody, folks, if you haven't already done so, please, please, please get vaccinated. The NWAcouncil.org website has a complete list of where you can go to get vaccinated. Yeah, I know it's not a popular topic for some folks, but I apologize. I just want to go back out and go to clubs and not clubs. I don't go to clubs anymore, but I want to go to Maxine's tap room and have a beer and not feel like I'm gonna die that night. And so I just want to encourage you guys. And I know that's a little hyperbole. I just please, 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 please. The NWA Council and everyone else is encouraging you to get vaccinated. Please do that. All the information that you need is on the NWA Council website. I certainly want to encourage you. They're doing things at the AMP before every event. That we will be out there at the Razorback games this weekend and every successive weekend that there is a game. Please, please, please get vaccinated if you can. I want to thank our guests for coming out and spending some time with us. Worth Sparkman, Chelsea Helms, Antoinette Grahada, and Brett Schulte for joining us for this special event. I think you guys knocked it out of the park. The council is already mapping out what the next Onward Ozarks might be. And it's probably going to come sooner than 3 months which is the frequency that we've been going for. So please, those of you that are here today, we had over 200 people. Kudos to you. Thank you so much for coming out and joining us for this special event. We even had people from out of town that know that Northwest Arkansas is the bee's knees. So thank you so much for participating with us. Thank you to our great panelists. Thank you to Kevin and the rest of PRSA. And just really want to encourage you guys to continue to refine your message, to continue to go out there and share great stories with people. And remember that, everybody has a superhero origin story and everybody has a superhero story to share. So please get your story out there, share it, whether it's on the local news, a local podcast, an email newsletter, whatever, just share that story. I'm Randy Wilburn, the host of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast and the host of this outstanding event. We want to thank you so much for being with us, and we ended just on time. I appreciate you guys so much. Have a wonderful day and go out there and be safe. Peace.